Chapter 5, Part 2 of Bel Ami, or The History of a Scoundrel. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Bel Ami, or The History of a Scoundrel, by Guy de Maupassant. Translator unknown. Chapter 5, The First Intrigue, Part 2. He was somewhat nervous the following day as he ascended Madame de Marelle's staircase. How would she receive him? Suppose she forbade him to enter her house? If she had told, but no, she could not tell anything without telling the whole truth. He was master of the situation. The little maidservant opened the door. She was as pleasant as usual. Duroy felt reassured and asked, "Is Madame well?" "Yes, sir, as well as she always is," was the reply, and he was ushered into the salon. He walked to the mantelpiece to see what kind of an appearance he presented. He was readjusting his cravat when he saw in the mirror the young woman standing on the threshold looking at him. He pretended not to have seen her, and for several moments they gazed at one another in the mirror. Then he turned. She had not moved. She seemed to be waiting. He rushed towards her, crying, "How I love you!" He clasped her to his breast. He thought, "It is easier than I thought it would be. All is well." He looked at her with a smile, without uttering a word, trying to put into his glance a wealth of love. She too smiled and murmured, "We are alone. I sent Laurine to lunch with a friend." He sighed and, kissing her wrists, said, "Thanks, I adore you." She took his arm as if he had been her husband and led him to a couch upon which they seated themselves side by side. Duroy stammered incoherently, "You do not care for me." She laid her hand upon his lips. "Be silent." "How I love you," said he. She repeated, "Be silent." They could hear the servant laying the table in the dining room. He rose. "I cannot sit so near you. I shall lose my head." The door opened. "Madame is served." He offered her his arm gravely. They lunched without knowing what they were eating. The servant came and went without seeming to notice anything. When the meal was finished, they returned to the drawing room and resumed their seats on the couch side by side. Gradually he drew nearer her and tried to embrace her. "Be careful, someone might come in," he whispered. "When can I see you alone to tell you how I love you?" She leaned towards him and said softly, "I will pay you a visit one of these days." He colored. "My rooms are very modest." She smiled. "That makes no difference. I shall come to see you and not your rooms." He urged her to tell him when she would come. She fixed a day in the following week, while he besought her with glowing eyes to hasten the day. She was amused to see him implore so ardently, and yielded a day at a time. He repeated, "Tomorrow, say tomorrow." Finally she consented. "Yes, Tomorrow at 5 o'clock." He drew a deep breath. Then they chatted together as calmly as if they had known one another for 20 years. A ring caused them to start. They separated. She murmured, "It is Laurine." The child entered, paused in surprise, then ran towards Duroy, clapping her hands, delighted to see him, and crying, "Ah, Bel Ami!" Mme. de Marelle laughed. "Bel Ami! Laurine has christened you. It is a pretty name. I shall call you Bel Ami too." He took the child upon his knee. At 20 minutes of 3, he rose to go to the office. At the half-open door, he whispered, "Tomorrow, 5 o'clock." The young woman replied, "Yes," with a smile, and disappeared. After he had finished his journalistic work, he tried to render his apartments more fit to receive his expected visitor. He was well satisfied with the results of his efforts, and retired, lulled to rest by the whistling of the trains. Early the next morning, he bought a cake and a bottle of Madeira. He spread the collation on his dressing table, which was covered with a napkin. Then he waited. She came at 5:15 and exclaimed as she entered, "Why, it is nice here!" But there were a great many people on the stairs. He took her in his arms and kissed her hair. An hour and a half later, he escorted her to a cab stand on the Rue de Rome. When she was seated in the cab, he whispered, "Tuesday at the same hour." She repeated his words, and as it was night, she kissed him. Then, as the cabman started up his horse, she cried, "Adieu, Bel Ami," and the old coupe rumbled off. For 3 weeks, Duroy received Mme. de Marelle every 2 or 3